Today we want to talk about the books that you should have in your bookshelf. I want to summarize the key takeaways of the books that I have on my bookshelf and what I learned from them. The truth is I do audiobooks. I don't really have the patience to just sit down and read. So I actually had to buy these books after I read or listened to them to kind of keep them as mementos or reminders of the lessons I learned so I don't forget them. So starting up front, we got personal finance books that changed my life. I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi. And the second is Unshakable by Tony Robbins. Both these books cover a lot of the same things you probably heard a lot where like you can't beat the market, financial advisors are stealing from you, etc. But what I really liked about these is that they really taught you about the psychology of money too. Not sweating the small stuff, not sweating the $3 Starbucks every day that's not going to make you rich, not worrying about every stock pick and the market fluctuating up or down. It's really more about the habit of automatically investing your money over the long term and building that muscle of investing. The best place to start if you have no idea what you're doing with the money, these two books. Next up, we got Stoicism books. All right, so big fan of Stoicism, and what started it all was this book right here, The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. This was recommended to me by one of my roommates back in DC, Nikki Nate, and it changed my life. So basically the key takeaway here is to not avoid obstacles in your life, but to actually embrace them and make them the way of your success. Not think of things as, things are not so bad, but actually look at the bad things as, wow, this is actually the greatest thing that can happen to me. And what was really cool about it is that it actually kind of prompts you to think of yourself as a philosopher. I always used to think of philosophers as academics and people that, don't really do anything real in life. But this book argues the contrary, that philosophers are men of action, and that's not a contradiction. So that's what started my whole Stoicism kick. Next up, Subtle Art Not Giving a F. So the key lesson here is, contrary to what most people believe, it's not teaching you not to care about anything. There are too many things in this world to care about, and we should focus on just the few that really matter to us rather than thinking about everything. Next up, we got Emperor's Handbook, which is basically a translation of Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. These two books are pretty much based off of this. Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink, gift by my cousin. Really appreciate this one. Really flips the concept of discipline on its head. Says the core tenet here is that discipline equals freedom. While most of us are trying to avoid discipline and trying to avoid structure in our lives, by adding some discipline and by taking ownership and believing that everything's our fault, we can actually take ownership and change our lives. Last but not least is Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life, which kind of builds off of discipline equals freedom. Talks about some of the rules like stand up straight with your shoulders back to bring more confidence. Or one of the best ones is also just clean your room, kind of talking about the idea of controlling the things that you can in your life and not worrying about the things that you can't. So we got those. Next up, we got leadership books. We got Nelson Mandela's Long Walk to Freedom, which is basically the story of his life, which is super inspiring. I started listening to the book when I was in South Africa and just like learning about his journey and how, after so many decades in prison, he still was able to kind of work with the enemy to create a new nation, and so many lessons like where he stepped down from power actually, which is contrary to pretty much everything else we see in the developing world, where these leaders are starving to just hold on to power in their corrupt ways. So just a good role model there. And then we also have Leaders Eat Last. A lot of the principles that Nelson Mandela led by, which is, the leader puts everyone ahead of them to make them better. And because of that, they're rewarded with praise and status ring, but it comes from them helping everyone else first. And so these are the core tenets of leadership I hope to continue in my path in business and life. Talking about business, we have business books. The first book here is the classic 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss. So this book, I think, flipped a lot of what entrepreneurship is on its head. So instead of thinking of, swinging for the fences, raising a ton of money, working nonstop, it really talked about delegation, automation, finding your magic number for retirement. It talks about implementing mini retirements instead of retiring one all at once because that's unrealistic. So there's too many lessons to talk about from this book, but I highly recommend picking it up. Then we also have Shoe Dog, Phil Knight's story, which is just a great story of Nike, and there's a lot of gems in here, but I think the biggest takeaways for me were the way LeBron James and Tiger Woods really appreciated Phil Knight and the care they had for him after so many years. And it just talks about how, a lot of business is relationships, and want to keep that going. Another Simon Sinek book, The Infinite Game. It basically talks about business being an infinite game, that it's a game we want to keep playing. It's not a game we necessarily need to win. Framing it that way, I think, is really helpful for everyone. So not get as disillusioned when things get rough. And then we have The Way to Wealth by Benjamin Franklin, which is basically just a collection of different quotes he kind of came up with. Benjamin Franklin would have been a YouTuber, I think, if he were alive today. Like, there's so many sayings that Benjamin Franklin came up with, or he's credited with, that we don't even know about. Like, no pain, no gain. That was Benjamin Franklin. And we kind of have like the modern take on this book, which is the Almanac of Naval Ravikant, which is basically just a collection of his best tweets. This just covers so many different ideas that it's hard to kind of summarize now. But, the biggest tenet being, we want to seek wealth, not status. Old and new tweet storms basically here. Then we got a little more traditional self-help books, Tools of Titans by Tim Ferriss. This is actually probably his worst book. I haven't read all of it. It's massive, but just a collection of the biggest takeaways he got from his top 100 interviewees, I think, from his podcast, where he's probably interviewed thousands. Kind of just take this as a reminder that I want to create something like this. Something where an almanac of tips that people have given me, or things that I've learned that can be useful to other people. And I want to create something like this virtual, so it's not as heavy and a little easier to search through, rather than having to skim through all this. And probably the best self-help book of the last couple of years, Atomic Habits by James Clear. This book just really talks about, similar to the finance books, not focusing on everything you can control, but focusing on the small changes you can control and hoping on the compound interest of your habits building over time to make incredible changes in your life. So very tactical book, teaches you how to start new habits. So very helpful. And then last but not least, we got general books about the world that I thought were helpful. First, my brother's book, On Display. It's a poetry book he wrote back when he recently graduated out of college. So very cool that my brother was able to write this, publish it. A lot of cool work and inspiration for myself. And the last book is Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari. And this is basically the history of humanity. And it's got so many hot takes. I had to stop taking notes on it because I was just transcribing the entire book. But I guess the biggest takeaway is just the power of shared stories and myths amongst humans. Like the idea of money and currency as a complete myth that doesn't exist really. It's just the stories we tell each other to transmit value. The power of kind of harnessing that to kind of create stories for ourselves. So that's a big takeaway. And then Homo Deus is kind of just the sequel to that, where it talks about the potential future of the human race and how we would evolve. And I just think these two books, combined together really will help you think more critically about the world that we're in and your place in it. So the book that's probably missing here is The Magnolia Story by Chip and Joanna Gaines. I just love the stuff they're doing, and I really want to emulate that myself, my own life. So I want to have that one front and centered. And other than that, I'm not really looking to read more books. I'm more looking to really ingrain the lessons of all these books into my head. If you found this video helpful, subscribe, because I want to make more videos like this. Maybe I can talk about the reason why I have some of these decorations behind me. They all have meaning. So I'll make that video in the future too. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.